You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud and to our Friday show where we take a break from the news cycle and breathe out. That was ASMR. Someone's going, oh!
Jessie, you never do it.
I hate ASMR. It makes me feel sick.
Okay, fair enough. No good vibes from Jessie.
And we're off to a cracking start for a Friday.
Okay, today is Friday the 16th of August and I'm Holly Wainwright.
I'm Mia Freedman.
And I'm Jessie Stevens.
And on today's show, if cats and dogs and rats and hamsters are our fur babies, what happens to them when human babies enter the picture? And a podcast worth binging, and an Australian icon whose midlife vulnerability rocks me. Yes, it's recommendation time, and best and worst of the week include Mia's Logies dilemma, Jessie's margaritas, and the best piece of advice I've had in forever. But first, Mia Freedman.
If you are going away this weekend, or in fact ever, and it involves an airport and a suitcase, don't tie a ribbon around the handle.
Oh!
In case you missed it, Mamamia spoke to Mike Harvey, who is the managing director at First Move International. I don't even know what that is. But he explained why attaching a ribbon to your suitcase, which many of us, including me, do to help you not pick up the wrong bag off the carousel, which I have also done more than once. If you attach a ribbon, it can actually interfere with the scanning process in the luggage hall. So if the ribbon causes issues during scanning, your bag may need to be manually processed, which can cause delays, or it might miss the flight altogether. So you know how when sometimes your bag doesn't show up, it's probably maybe
Your ribbon.
Your ribbon.
See, I never have a ribbon and my bag's always shown up. So there.
Have you taken the wrong bag before?
I have. So I was going to say I've never done a ribbon, I've never done a tag, I've never done anything. And I just buy the cheapest luggage I can, which happens to be the same luggage as everyone else.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who needs a ribbon? I'm not an idiot. Anyway, I've taken the wrong bag home, opened it, gone, these are not my things, and got a very angry call from the airport.
Yeah,
because I had ruined someone's day.
They don't
It was
like
I
it.
need my stuff. And I was like, I'll be right there.
So what I do is that my whole bag is a ribbon. I just buy a bag in the most lurid colour that you can imagine. I've got a hot pink suitcase.
Oh, of
That's
course
very
you do.
Mia Freedman of you.
Yeah.
I like it. I'm bringing trouble today. It's Friday and I'm feeling feisty. I would like to bring the group's attention to an article in The Cut from New York Magazine by a woman who had possibly the best reason ever for remaining anonymous while writing on the internet. She is complaining about her cat. Not only complaining, actually, but confessing. The article is called "Why Did I Stop Loving My Cat When I Had a Baby?" and it comes with an editor's note. The editor's note reads, "This story is part of a New York Magazine exploration of the ethics of pet ownership, sharing a variety of points of view on whether we're equipped to care for the animals in our homes. The magazine confirmed the welfare of this cat prior to publication."
I was going to say this sounds so boring, but I'm in now.
Oh my God, it's so good. As you might gather from the title, the woman in question has a baby and a cat. And the cat came first. She writes in blisteringly honest detail about how since the baby arrived, she not only is less interested in Lucky, her beloved pussycat, but that she actively resents her. She writes about being tempted, but not actually acting on it, to kick said cat. She confesses to leaving the window open so that Lucky might escape. And she admits to forgetting to leave Lucky any water, so she found the paw prints all over the toilet where he was desperately drinking from the bowl, forgetting to groom her, forgetting to feed her anything but the most basic of foods. She spoke to lots of different pet owners who had babies. And she writes, "Like me, none of the women I spoke with had intentionally obtained her pet to use the animal as training wheels for a baby. None would think of seeing her pet in such frostily instrumental terms. They got their pets for all the usual sweet reasons, for companionship, to offer a safe home. Just because a pet can function as a prototype baby doesn't mean it must, or that it's only that. But let's grant that that happens. You had a pet who was your baby, and now you have a baby who is your baby. Does that mean the pet is sentenced to irrelevance?" I want to talk about the ethics and the drivers of our love for pets, but first I need to be mischievous and ask my co-host Jessie Stevens, didn't you say something quite similar to this about your beloved dog Chili?
I resent the term similar because I never expressed a will to kick my dog
You did not.
or leave the doors open. I was a little bit horrified, to be completely honest, by some of the things I read in that article. But what I did say was that it surprised me in the aftermath, in that postpartum period, particularly sort of 3 or 4 months after having a baby, my response to my dog. Because what happened, I'm not sure if I told this story, but we got home from hospital and Luca had the car seat and he put the car seat down on the floor in our house. And I felt a sensation I have never felt before, which was sheer terror.
Was the baby in the car seat?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, like, what do you call it when it's
The
like
capsule.
The capsule.
I thought you meant you just brought an empty capsule to just try out what it looked like in your lounge
We
room.
probably should have.
Yeah.
But the baby was in the capsule.
Okay, yep.
And he put the capsule down and the dog was on the other side of the room. But I felt just sheer terror. And I saw in my mind's eye, I was like, the dog attacks the baby. It was all playing out. And I had a real visceral response. And from there, it's not that I didn't love my dog. I always loved my dog. But I became a little bit scared. I became almost like very vigilant of keeping the two apart. And since speaking to some healthcare workers and, you know, people who work in hospitals, they've said that is very sensible because they have seen some horrific
Good
scenes.
instincts.
And it was an instinct.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of friends say this as well, that whereas before they would be on the floor playing with their dog for endless hours, dog slept in the bed, all of those things, dog can't sleep in the bed when you're up feeding overnight. Like it just can't be done.
It's gone lower in the leaderboard.
Yeah.
The relationship has shifted.
The relationship shifted. And so I spoke about it on the podcast and I said it made me sad.
That was a mistake,
And
wasn't it?
I think that
then,
was your worst of the week.
it was my worst of the week, right? And then I moved on with my life and continued walking, feeding and watering my dog.
And loving your dog.
And loving my dog unconditionally. And then somewhere in the bowels of the internet, a rumour started that I had rehomed and or put down my dog, which I learnt through multiple podcast reviews that said...
on our show.
Yeah, on our show, on Cancelled, saying, someone call the RSPCA. If someone called the RSPCA and they turned up to my home,
Oh, dear.
they would find my dog on her throne in the biggest bed you've ever seen with a very shiny coat, living her best life.
Almost her best life.
Almost. Well,
Slightly displaced as
slightly.
top of the leaderboard.
Exactly.
Of the people who get your love in your house, but still.
But I think that the idea that when a baby comes along, and it's funny, right? Because another worst of the week that I had was about how I felt like I wasn't giving enough time and energy to my pup who has dementia, to my cousin who I've always cared for, that caring or the nurturing muscle is finite. It's not endless. There are only so many hours in a day. And when you are physically attached to a baby, you can't have the dog on your lap all day. You just can't.
No, but you are talking about very practical things and you're very sensible and you're right 100%. But there's something else going on here. And it's why we get pets in the first place, right? Because what this story was about and what lots and lots of pieces that are about this very thing is about is that very often people get pets before they have babies and those pets are their babies, as she says in this, right? We've repositioned the place of pets in our lives for lots of different reasons, I think. We call them our fur babies. You know, there was a big...
Well, not everybody does.
No, of course not.
And
I
some people don't like
but
that, yeah.
culturally is what I'm talking about,
Oh,
right? Like
yes.
culturally, we have elevated pets to their fur babies.
They have dog walkers.
You can eat
they're
their
on
food. You've seen those ads for the dog food where the
medication.
person's eating it. And there's a fragrance that you can buy for your dog.
I took my dogs to a psychiatrist.
Your dogs go to a
Not
psychiatrist.
even joking.
There are dog hotels, we have elevated the status of our pets. And like the three of us are all dog people and we all love our dogs enormously. But there is a very real thing at play here. And I've heard you describe it before, Jessie, as like you need a place to put your nurture. Because I didn't have a dog before I had a kid. I mean, I had one when I was growing up. I think we got our family dog at a perfect time for me in that it was just as I was coming out of that really cuddly, nurtury thing with my kids because they're older. And now I've replaced the baby stage with my pup. Like I can cuddle her all day long and she always likes to see me and she's never going, ugh, and looking at her phone. Like, so I get an emotional, nurturing need met by my dog that probably for years there I was getting from my little kids.
We do have an instinct to care for things that need to be cared for, right? And just because you love dogs or love cats or love your pets doesn't mean that it's a maternal or paternal thing. I think that there are people who are brilliant pet owners who don't have any interest in kids, for example. But there's something about the nurturing that's very good for us, and also the physical touch element, right? Parents talk about like being touched out and feeling like there's too much of that. I wonder if it is for people who feel like that's missing from their life, like something to love more than themselves and that will unconditionally love you back. I think that is sort of filling that void for a lot of us.
Yeah, I mean, there's that saying, if you have teenagers and you want someone to be happy to see you when you get home, get a dog. And I think there can be eras, not just related to whether you have kids or not and how old those kids are, but just times in your life. I mean, we saw a lot of people get dogs, myself included, or get pets during COVID, during lockdown, when we were home all the time, and when those dogs and cats got a lot of love and a lot of time and a lot of attention because we had nowhere else to put any of that stuff. But then when we had to go back to work or we could travel again and all of those things, it's no wonder we've got a generation of really anxious, confused dogs who are like, hang on, weren't we in love? What happened? We used to hang out all the time. And I think there are just times in your life where your dog is center stage, or your cat, and times when they're not. And I mean, at its worst, some people are horrendous and just go and dump them. And thank heavens for dog shelters. And if anyone wants to get a pet, please go and look at a pet shelter, because tens of thousands of dogs and cats that are beautiful get put down every day because someone either couldn't look after them anymore or just didn't want to look after them anymore.
That makes me so sad, right? Like it
Of
really
course,
does.
It's
And
tragic.
I was reading a different story about a woman who had 3 dogs, and then she had 2 kids come along, and she basically went, oh my goodness, this is completely untenable. And you're right what you say, Mia, about there are seasons with pets, but the thing is, where does that leave the pet, right? So you're exactly right. Yeah.
And on medication.
You lean
sometimes.
in.
Just speaking
But
for
then
my
I
dogs.
also think that the transition, the baby transition, is like, I mean, maybe one day Luna will have a sibling, and then Luna is going to have to share the limelight. Like that is actually how
Families
work, and the dynamics are constantly changing. And as long as the dog's needs are being met, then I think we can all rest easy that the dog is okay,
The dog
right?
is okay. Of course the dog's okay. But I think we've also got to be realistic. It's like if you were in a polygamous marriage and your partner brought a new partner home and went, it's so great, there'll just be more love to go around. Well, maybe.
The difference is,
but
though,
it's probably not going to be
that
that
we're-
good for you.
That we're humans,
that
right?
analogy.
We're humans with quite complex brains. I love dogs. I think they're superior to
Yeah.
humans in a lot of different ways. Dogs' brains aren't quite as
No.
complex as like. I think that the dogs are okay. I really think that the dogs are okay. I don't think they're sitting there doing the maths in their little diary going, I used to get 70% of the cuddles
true.
and now it's down to 42% of the cuddles. But today it's up a little bit because I think they're fine, right?
Yeah. I think about this all the time because we recently just sent our dogs away for a month because we needed to. And I often thought about what they thought. One of them wouldn't have thought anything because she's barely sentient, but the other one has deep thoughts.
Oh.
And I often wonder if she'd go to sleep going, we had such a great thing. We were so in love, and I wonder if I'll ever see her again.
People who love their pets, which is hopefully everyone who has a pet, but as you very rightly pointed out, Mia, that's not true. We create entire worlds for them, right?
Yes.
And you also do that when you have a baby. So my dog has a voice.
Yeah.
She has a lot of opinions.
Yeah.
She knows exactly which of us she likes best.
Yeah.
I know
She
which
has
TV
conversations.
shows she likes.
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
where she likes to sit most in the house. I know what she thinks about all the other dogs in the neighborhood. Like I've created a whole world for my dog.
So true.
And I remember when we got a baby. when we brought Matilda home and she was just a little tiny, in the immortal words of Angelina Jolie, blob, when she was just a little gorgeous little blob. We had a voice for her, and same thing, right? Like, what does she do when we're not looking, when she's in her cot? Like, we created a whole world for her, and I wonder if it's like when you love things, people, pets, whatever, like you create these worlds for them, and then, as you say, Mia, other things shuffle along and you've got to change that. I was thinking about how it's kind of a bit of an offensive idea to say that pets are basically baby substitutes, which is what this lady was sort of saying in this piece. Is she was saying we don't really mean for that to be the case, but that is what they are. And then I was taking that to the J.D. Vance extreme of like childless cat ladies and what a sort of insulting idea that is. But then I also know parents who get very pissed off when people who don't have kids but have pets compare those loves. We've read those eye-rolly pieces about people who want pet bereavement leave, and people will roll their eyes about that. And I don't think anyone here necessarily would, because we've all lost beloved pets. But there's almost like we really want to create a leaderboard for everybody in the world about what matters and who loves who most and all those things.
I don't know why that makes people so mad. If someone sees their dog as their baby, I think that's fantastic. I think if you love something that much, I think if you're trying to compare it in terms of how much work and responsibility it is, I think you're probably wrong. I don't think it's comparable. But I don't think that's a problem. I think that if you're a person who just goes, you know what, I'm going to have a dog or two or a cat or whatever and love this as much as I would love a baby, I think that's a fantastic thing.
I was reading an interview with Dan Levy, from Schitt's Creek. He wrote this movie and starred in it about grief. And he was talking about how his inspiration for writing the movie was that his grandmother died during COVID, who he was close to, but then his dog died right before filming started. And he'd had this dog and spent every day with this dog for like 15 years and had come onto set with him and everything. And he said that impacted me more than my grandmother dying, because he wasn't trying to compare them and put them on the leaderboard, but he said it was the most significant relationship of my life in terms of hours. Like, he doesn't have a partner, or he hasn't had a long-term partner. And he loved his grandmother, but he sort of saw her a few times a year kind of thing. But his dog he'd been with every day for 15 years. And people can have seasons. And I think that instinct that you talk about, Jessie, we're biologically programmed to prioritise our children over our dogs when they're helpless. Our babies over everything. I remember bringing my second child home, or my third child home, and you have that thing when you have a second child, if you do, and you think, oh, how will I ever love anyone as much as this first child? And then I found myself, she got a little bit too close, and she was about 3, and I kind of lashed out. I didn't hit her or anything, but I was just like, I gave her a bit of a fright because I sort of put my hand up instinctively. And I remember being incredibly guilty, but feeling that visceral protective instinct. And I knew in that moment, if I had to choose who to protect, I just instinctively was going to choose the one that needed me to protect them the most, the weakest. And I remember someone who you know quite well, Jessie, talking to them about having a baby and saying, I don't know if I'll ever love anyone as much as I love my dog. And I know that feeling too. And then there is more love. But in terms of what's in it for the dog or the cat, I would say it's a net negative, but that's also okay.
I don't know. Chili's getting a lot of leftovers.
Yeah, that's
she's getting a lot of
There's
feeding.
Definitely an upside.
And look, a downside for Chili is that my camera roll, my phone background, used to be
Chili
used to be everywhere. And do I take less photos of Chili? I do. I will admit that publicly. Does Chili mind? I don't think so.
Before you had Luna, we used to have a family group chat with some members of our family and your sister, and it used to be about our dogs, our shared dogs, of which there have been different numbers over the years as dogs have come and gone, but not been rehomed, not been put down. Sadly, one died. We acquired a couple of new ones. And that used to be one of the most active group chats on my phone. And gosh, it's been dormant for a while. Right. I couldn't even remember. I wanted to put something in there the other day and I couldn't even remember what it was called.
I think when we lost our dog Elvie, I wrote a story and I remember saying, like, dogs are a place where you put your feelings. Like, I think pets are like, they're a place where you put your feelings. You can be silly and fun with them. You can be cuddly and loving with them. And to the point about the Dan Levy story, I remember when we lost Elvie and we were all so upset and Brent was particularly devastated. A lot of women said to me, oh, my husband or my brother or whatever, he couldn't cry when he lost his sibling or his parent or whatever. He cried a river when he lost his dog. Wow. Again, I think it's like a place you can put your feelings that is like an uncomplicated place,
There's such a simplicity too. And the stage that I'm in with a, just over 1-year-old, there's a simplicity to that too, which is that I will walk in the door this afternoon and there will be a dog and a baby that think I am the best person in the world.
It's so true.
Like, I walk in and there's smiles from her and the dog's tail wags and it is like I am the best. And I know that's not going to be there forever, but I see a similarity in that way, that there's a simplicity. Whatever happens, people can accuse me of rehoming my dog on the internet.
We do need proof of life.
I come home.
She did a defensive post. I saw it. She posted a picture of Luca really cuddling Chili. It was a very handsome picture of both of them. And I was like, that is such a defensive post. She was like, dog's still here. She wasn't quite holding up a newspaper with the date on it, but she could have been.
I should
have.
Yeah,
Proof.
Really should have. Out Louders, last week we announced that Claire and I are doing our biggest Lazy Girl giveaway ever. It is a trip for two to Turkey with Explore, and Explore have organised the whole thing for you. So as part of this giveaway, you win a holiday valued at over $9,000.
Do you know why this is perfect? Because I like going on holidays, but I cannot organise them. I just don't
course you
have.
can't.
I find it too confusing and I just can't. So the fact that it's organised, and Turkey's beautiful. I've been there before. It's gorgeous.
Oh, it's one of the best places in the world. And if you are a Mamamia subscriber, you're already in the running. You've entered a competition today. You could be winning a holiday to Turkey. If you are not a subscriber, but you would love to enter and enter all future Lazy Girl giveaways, you can use the code VACAY20 for 20% off a yearly Mamamia subscription. There's a link in the show note that applies the code automatically at checkout. Prize draw is on the 20th of August. T's and C's apply.
It's Friday, so we want to help set up your weekend with our best recommendations. Holly, you're going first, and I'm jealous because I wasn't paying attention in the meeting and you said this and I was going to say it, but I just want to add a +1 and then I'll do what I have had to do because you got in first.
Dibs. I called dibs. But
did.
it's like
Shotgun.
when it's that case, which I think a couple of our recommendations are today, it can be from both of us.
Okay,
you are
thanks.
allowed to chip in.
Appreciate
you
it.
are allowed to do that. Because it does involve one of your friends.
It does.
One Lee Sales, who Out Louders would know is one of our friends because, well, she's one of Mia's friends, but I'll claim her. She narrated one of the videos at our live show.
Oh, she did. I forgot about
Such
that.
a great
Friend of the pod, Lee
Friend of the
Sales.
pod, Lee Sales. On Monday night, Australian Story was an interview, different from the usual Australian Story style, which was just an interview with her and Nick Cave, right? I don't think I need to explain. Do you think I need to explain who Nick Cave is? Mia's very good at always making sure.
Oh, some
Nick
songs
Cave
that
is
Nick
an
Cave sings.
Iconic
Sing a couple, Holly.
Australian rock star, particularly enormous in the 90s and noughties. Red Right Hand, Into Your Arms, Straight to You, that's my favourite, the Ship song. I just an icon, right? But an icon for many years of a sort of nihilistic, drug-addled, gothic bad boy. I'm just going to say bad boy.
See,
that's
I
what I'm
didn't
going to
have
say.
that context because I've only known Nick Cave sort of in the last 10 years.
Yes.
So that's interesting
Like,
context.
and always very cool. Cool is the word.
Okay, yeah.
Unbelievably cool. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, the birthday party, just cool, right? The thing is that as anyone who lives vaguely near the internet would know, in the past decade, Nick Cave has suffered unthinkable loss. Several years ago, he lost his son Arthur, who was 15 years old and tragically appears to have jumped from a cliff near their home on the south coast of England. And then a couple of years ago, he lost his adult son, Jethro, who was 31. So unthinkable loss for anybody. But one of the things that's happened to Nick Cave in this decade or so since is he has completely sort of changed his, I want to say his persona, in that he started this, something you would never have expected a person like Nick Cave to do, he did in the years after losing Arthur, which is that he started a newsletter basically called The Red Hand Files, where he wrote about loss and grief and he invited other people to do the same. They began to share all these stories and he's turned that into music and he's turned it into art and he's turned it into part of his live show. And the reason I loved this interview with Lee so much, and I've listened to lots of interviews with him and he's written an amazing book and about all of this stuff, is it's it brings home this kind of change that can come upon people as things happen to them in their lives. There aren't that many people who get to midlife and beyond without suffering loss. Not this level of loss necessarily. I'm not, and there is no leaderboard of grief, but the depth of that and what the change in him. And he speaks very honestly about that. He says to Lee, like, I always lived for art and thought that my art was the most important thing. And if I was off locked in a room creating it, that's what I was doing. And he's realized that actually, no, connection is much more important, that he's a father first, which all sounds like cliches until you hear him talking about it.
Yeah. For most of my life, I was just sort of in awe of my own genius, because I was involved in this great work and this just collapsed completely, and I just sort of saw the folly of that idea that art sort of trounces everything. It just doesn't apply to me anymore. I'm a father and I'm a husband and a kind of person of the world. These things are much more important to me than the concept of being an artist.
It's like seeing this elder statesman look back on that young version of himself too, and sort of also like kind of laughing at him, which is interesting.
There's something called post-traumatic growth that doesn't happen to everybody. We're much more familiar with post-traumatic stress syndrome and the terrible things that can happen to people after they've experienced trauma. But there's another group of people who experience the exact opposite. And I've got a friend who lost a child, and she said it was like the light in her life was turned up, not down. And by that, of course, she doesn't mean I'm happier than I was or I'm glad that she lost the child. She doesn't mean that at all, of course. But she means that it brought, like Nick Cave said, it brought her life meaning. It opened her up to other people. It made her bigger in the world and in her heart, rather than shutting her down. And clearly that's what's happened to Nick Cave. Like, he gets hundreds of letters every week, and he says he reads every single one of them, and he chooses a couple to answer in the newsletter. And he sees it as because, you might hear that and think, oh, well, that's a burden. But you can really see that he's found purpose in a way that he probably thought he found in his music. And I'm sure at that time he did find a degree of purpose. But you're right. In comparison to that, this is, for him, a much more profound sense of purpose.
Yes, it's like he's looked up and out. Yeah. And I think that's something that ideally happens as you mature, I'm going to say. But like, it's not all about you anymore. Yeah. Like, and you look up and out, and his grief and his loss has made him do that. It's a great interview because at times he's a bit testy with Lee. You can tell that he's been talking about this for a long time now, and he's kind of ready to close the chapter almost.
That's actually not true. So I was talking to Lee about it, and I really liked that they left in the little niggle where he says, actually today is the anniversary of Jethro's death, and he looks a little bit stricken, and she says, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realise that it was today. And then he's like, look, that's okay. I didn't expect it to come up so early in the interview. And she said that made it seem like she'd kind of brought it up, and Lee's never defensive, and she wasn't being defensive, but she said what he was actually saying is that he is the one that always brings it up now, and that he wants to talk about it all the time. And she said he kept bringing it back to that. And one of the most moving things was when he talked about, as you said, the meaning that he finds in being a father and a husband. And he said, and I'm a grandfather now.
I mean, it's just been the most amazing experience. I wasn't quite prepared for how much it would affect me. This little guy, his name's Roman Cave, is such a gorgeous-looking little creature. I mean, it's extraordinary. It's made me extraordinarily happy.
And the way that he says that, I was just in tears through this interview. Beautiful. It was really, really beautiful.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to suggest that Lee was big at all, but what I meant is I've listened to a lot of conversations with him about this, and you can sort of feel that he's like...
Do you know the other thing that's interesting? That
almost ready to move through it.
It wasn't touched on in this, but I've heard him say before, because you're right, it does come up, and how could it not come up in every sort of long-form interview that he does? There's an interview that he did with Louis Theroux where it came up as well. That's a beautiful interview too. But he said, I can talk about Arthur, but Jethro, who is his eldest son by his previous partner, Jethro's mother doesn't like me to talk about Jethro. And he said, that's actually really difficult because Jethro is my son too, and I don't want it to seem like his death affected me any less, but out of respect to her, in the interview, Lee talks about Susie, his wife, and Arthur's mother. He said a mother losing a child is different to a father losing a child. And he said, I watched her just almost entomb herself in the dark, in bed, not being able to get up. And then he said watching her eventually rise from that and get back to work and rejoin the world, he said that was just an awe-inspiring thing to see. It was it's on
Beautiful.
iView. Go listen to
watch
it. It's
it.
beautiful.
I want to recommend a podcast. I haven't listened to a sort of podcast series in a very long time.
Like a limited series.
Yeah, I came across, it's called Hysterical, and it's a Wondery podcast, and I've listened to the first 5 episodes, which are all that are available so far, and I am really enjoying it.
What's
I'm
it about?
racing through it.
Me too. I'm calling dibs on this one.
Yeah, it's so good.
In 2011, something strange began to happen at the high school in Leroy, New York.
There was a lot going on with these girls having outbursts.
Reporting more than a dozen girls at Leroy High School say they have an illness that causes severe tics and verbal outbursts.
I was like at my locker and she came up to me and she was like stuttering super bad. I'm like, stop f***ing around. She's like, I can't.
I felt like Linda Blair in The Exorcist.
Wow.
It's about a mysterious illness that spread to a number of high school girls in upstate New York. I remember this story from
Yeah, you would
the
remember
news.
it. The ticking.
Was it during COVID?
No, before that. So it was like these girls started exhibiting like spasms, seizures, tics, and it was the same kind of noises that they'd make, almost like Tourette style, like.
You know, this happened during COVID as well, around the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is in one little town.
Yeah,
This
wow.
is in one little town called Leroy in the US. And basically a bunch of psychiatrists looked at it, and then they had the state come in and examine what was going on, and they put it down to like a type of social contagion. Sort of like, you know what teenage girls are like. They're a bit mad. Then what happened is they started looking at like, is there an environmental explanation? And the podcast goes back, it looks at the Salem witch trials. It looks at if there was a similar thing going on there. Why would these symptoms come up? And then they look at, you know, it happened with a group of military men or men who were deployed at the other side of the world and started coming up with these symptoms that didn't make sense, but that were clustered.
Yeah.
It's about group hysteria.
Yeah. So it's kind of about mass hysteria and contagion. And if there is an explanation, and I'm still not sure, but it even involves Erin Brockovich makes an appearance because she came in to check, you know, was
To see if there was something in the water.
soccer field, the water,
Yeah,
exactly.
wow.
Was that it? And yeah, it's about women's health. It's about when you kind of stop asking questions and what it means to say it's all in your head.
Yeah.
How dismissive.
Women have always been told that.
Yeah. And I'm really interested
And
in
it's
where it's
also
going.
funny. Like, I'm
Yeah.
really enjoying the podcast.
Oh,
Like, it's
sounds really serious.
It's really like the way he tells the story is great. It's got humor, and he's spoken to all these girls and all their parents, and it's just very satisfying. I'm finding it very satisfying.
I'm loving it.
For links to all our recommendations, you've got to be signed up to the Mamamia Out Loud newsletter. I often see Out Louders go in the Facebook group and they're going like, what was that show?
Yeah.
What was that thing? Just sign up for the newsletter and you will get the links to all our recommendations, as well as lots of behind-the-scenes gossip and stuff from our friend Em Vernon. There's a link in the show notes for how you do that.
Want unlimited Out Loud access? We drop episodes every Tuesday and Thursday exclusively for Mamamia subscribers. Follow the link in the show notes to get us in your ears 5 days a week. And a huge thank you to all our current subscribers. It's time for our best and worst of the week. This is the part of the show where we share a little bit more from our personal lives. Mia, what is your worst?
My worst is that I'm going to the Logies in, I think, 48 hours and I don't have anything to
This
wear.
is my best
I am so excited.
that
Are
you're
you?
going to the Logies.
I
yeah.
want to know I'm so obsessed with the outfit journey.
Like, what are the options? Just give us a
talk to
vibe
us
of the
about it.
options. Like, what have we got?
I don't mean to be rude. My worst is going to the Logies. And that sounds very
It
privileged
does.
and ungrateful, but it's not my jam. I don't like going to big fancy things. I don't like going out on a Sunday night
You don't like
or actually any
working.
night.
Can I tell you that I follow Laura Byrne on Instagram, and this week she shared a story of her at a very fancy dress shop in a ball gown being like, getting ready for the Logies. And I panicked for you. I was like, Mia really needs to get on a dress because Laura's looking really good and Mia has nothing.
Is Laura on TV? I mean, I'm not on
she's
TV.
She's with Maddie J.
Yeah.
She's on. But I like.
Is Maddie J on TV? I don't know.
I love it.
I'm really not on TV. I'm glad that Laura's going to be there because that's another person I know. But
Babe, there's people I've seen. My Instagram is wall to wall. People getting procedures.
What?
People
Yes.
putting their face mask, getting their hair. Like people have been gaming this for weeks.
do you know, so the reason I'm going out ladders is because Strife, which I co-produced, is nominated for Best Comedy. And so I've been invited by Binge. I'm at the Binge table, going with Bruna, feeling very anxious about it. Anxious because I feel like I'm going to be bored because it goes for 6 hours. And it's just not my thing, right? It's just not my thing. And then also, it's a very tricky wardrobe assignment, not unlike your wedding, Jessie.
On the invite to the Logies, does it
Because-
give you a dress code?
Probably says black tie. I mean, it's black tie. Everyone's watched the
fancy.
Logies. You've seen the Logies. It's bloody fancy.
Okay.
You don't get much fancier than the Logies. As you say, people have had things made. They're wearing ball gowns. Now, there has never been more of a side character at the Logies than me, right? Like, exactly, why am I going to the Logies?
Yeah.
It is not my night. Unlike Asha Kenny, for example, nominated for a gold, Strife,
Do you know what she's wearing?
Best
Have you guys
Comedy.
been chatting?
I forgot to ask. I just keep telling her I'm worried about being bored.
So, Mia, what are your options? Like,
Please
what's
just
hanging in
talk
your
to us about the
wardrobe?
fashion.
Well, so what
are
I
we-
was going to do is, with your wedding, Jessie, I went and tried on like 45 different dresses. Literally, I think it was 45 different dresses. And it was a whole thing and I put it on Instagram and I was like, I'll do that this time. It'll be great content. And then I went, I can't be bothered.
Yeah.
And so I didn't. And I tried on 2 dresses last weekend. I took photos of them and I was like, I'll start making it. No, I can't be bothered. I couldn't even be, even those 2 dresses was too much.
So you're doing
So-
like a floor length number? Is that
You're
like
shopping your closet is what
Shopping
you
my
told me.
closet, yeah.
So what we're doing is we're trying on things from the closet.
Yeah, Sunday morning. Binge very kindly said,
Sunday morning.
do you want to come and have your hair and makeup done? That's my other worst nightmare. We've got a slot for you at 8:30 a.m. I was like,
What time do you have to be at?
I don't know.
Okay.
I
Look,
want to know.
Mia,
You know
this
what?
is
The
why
first
you
thing,
are-
whenever I'm asked anywhere, the first thing I ask, what time can I go home and where will I park?
I'm not vain, but you need to get your hair and makeup
No.
done.
Baby,
Tell me
yes,
that
you do.
you're not doing
Couldn't
it
stand
yourself.
Of course I am. Of course, I couldn't stand it. I couldn't
Mia,
stand
you
it.
can't do
No.
your own hair and
Well,
makeup.
so this is
Can you
why
imagine
you
me going
are-
and getting my hair and makeup done at 8:30?
This
I would
is why
rather
you are an
eat
enigma.
a box of hair.
This is why you're an enigma wrapped in a riddle, Mia Freedman, because one of the things people think when they think Mia Freedman is they do think fashion, don't they?
Clothes,
right?
yeah.
They,
Love
they
clothes so
know
much.
you love clothes.
Yep.
They know you do. You would imagine that for a lot of people who love clothes,
Yes.
this is their like
You would
everything.
think that. My
but
friend
you are.
Paula Joy,
Yeah.
who's a stylist, is like, can I dress you? I'm like, no.
Oh, let Paula do
Why?
it.
No, because I can't be bothered.
Oh.
It's boring to me. It's not interesting.
Can you wear eyelashes? You can't go to the
I don't
Logies
know
and
how
not
to put
have
them on.
eyelashes.
Why
Well,
not?
that's a makeup artist.
I can't be bothered. No.
Explain.
And I
Get
don't
Lucy
spend
to come
money.
over, the makeup artist Lucy
Who?
who does us for the
I
show.
also just don't want to.
Okay.
I'm going to
She's
leave
such a
early
grouch.
and get there late. No one is looking at me. You
Babe,
know when
you
your
know what
mum
you
used to say that to you?
are, and you're gonna let
no
us
one
down.
is looking at you.
You're representing us.
Can you imagine? My worst nightmare, which I'm also having anxiety about, is if someone grabs me and says, will you be on that spinny thing so people can vote?
I'll give you $100 if you get on the spinny thing.
Maybe I should just march up and leap onto the spinny thing. And you know when you're at home and you're watching the Logos and you're like, who the fuck is that?
Please get on the spinny
Mia,
thing.
you're being a drain. I need you to lift.
I can't
Be a
explain.
radiator for the
Yeah,
Logies.
It's so true.
Getting
I'm
it
sorry,
into the
out
Logie
loud, I'm
spirit.
going to be back on Monday with all the gossip.
And Mia, speaking of the Logies, you can still vote.
You can.
I'm not going to say lines are still open, but we'll have a link in our show
No,
notes.
you can
People
do it online.
online.
It's a kind of line.
I want to say the lines are still open. It sounds good.
If you want to see Mia looking revolting on stage after winning
Yes.
it,
Out loud as if you
She
really want to
never
see me in real time trying to get an Uber. Actually, what am I talking about? I will drive because I'm only going to have one drink.
if you want to see Mia in a tracksuit,
Yes.
a shiny face and bad hair,
Yeah. We
well,
need to win. Strife
yes,
needs to win.
Strife needs to win. So it's in the comedy category. And while you're there, vote for Asha.
Yeah.
For the gold. What's your best for them?
Come on, cheer up, Dom.
Oh, my best is my youngest child turned 16 this week and we went out for a family dinner, which you didn't come to, Jessie, because you had to babysit your own child.
Babysitting your own child.
That's what you call it.
Anyway, we did.
She wasn't
and
invited.
it was so... No, she's not in the family group chat. We do have one group chat. No, she's in the family group chat. I just love this age. You know, I've written a lot about the sadness of your children growing up, particularly your sons, and leaving you and it being sad and everything. And I'm now kind of at this stage where all my kids are at that age where they're kind of, I'm going to get into so much trouble saying this, my mates. But sorry. God, I'm disgusting. I'm so sorry. That is.
Can we kick her out of the group chat?
I'm just burping into the microphone. I need to go home. Anyway, my kids.
So sorry out loud.
I'm really tired of parenting. It's been 28 years. And now I feel like my youngest is 16. I know I'm not over the finish line yet, but it just feels like it's just at a good age. You can swear in front of them. You can kind of just, it's good. I love him.
Do you have to
He's
teach him
great.
to drive?
Someone has to, not me. I'm the worst driver in the family. But it's lovely. They're like, my kids are my favourite people to hang out with, apart from you two bitches. They are really, I love hanging out with them. They're just good fun. They're funny.
Did you have a really nice dinner?
We had a really nice dinner, yeah.
Does Remy like food the way that Luca likes food? Some of you like food and some of you
not
don't.
as much. Remy likes fragrance.
Yeah, that's right.
Luca used to like food, but now sort of doesn't really care. Holly, what's your worst of the week?
Okay, it's a bit grim. You can probably tell from my Nick Cave recommendation. I'm feeling very
nihilistic.
What's the point of it all? You know?
Yeah, it gets a bit like that.
I'm looking for meaning, but my best and worst are related. So my worst is being far from my parents. I know this is like a recurring theme because
That's okay.
I have been living far from them for, like 25, maybe nearly 30 years. But anyway, they're getting old, as I've discussed, because I went home earlier this year for my dad's 80th. But they're at the moment, things are happening that are just not great. And it's just hard, right? It's really hard. It's hard to feel helpless at a distance. It's hard to not want to jump in and daughter it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you can't. Lots of my friends, because I've got quite a lot of friends, particularly Sydney friends, who are from other places, and a lot of them are having these similar things. And I've spoken before about the plane dashes they have to make. But one of the things too is that often their siblings will be back where they are and having to take on caring responsibilities, and it's hard to not be there. And also this kind of weird tension about how involved can you be? How much can you control or suggest? It's really hard watching them through a phone screen, just not being great. And I'm finding that very difficult. And it's interesting because obviously a lot of the content I'm making for Mid at the moment is about that kind of stage of life.
So it's like a remote sandwich, like the sandwich generation, but a remote sandwich.
And also it's hard because, I'm not always very good at making decisions to action, very unlike Mia, who's very good at decisions to action. But it really is perplexing to know what the right thing to do is, because you can't be on a plane every week, obviously. You can't tell grown-up people what to do. You know what I mean? You can't say, I think this and I think that. And also, you don't know. You're not there all the time. It's perplexing to make decisions that you can feel comfortable and confident about. You can't plan too far into the future because you don't know how things are going to be. Because generally speaking, things don't tend to get a lot better when it comes to
There was a
old age.
beautiful newsletter that I sent to you, Hole, that was written by an out louder called Ruth Devine. And her newsletter is called Bear With. She's also English, and her mother recently passed away in the UK, and she wrote about what that felt like. And I was like, I didn't know whether to send it to you or not, but I thought ultimately it might be helpful. And I thought she articulated it really beautifully.
It was absolutely beautiful because I think it's such a difficult thing. And I'm not saying it's not any more difficult. In fact, I'm sure it's a lot less difficult than caring for elderly parents or worrying about elderly parents who are down the road.
It's just a different type of
And that's also
difficult.
part of it, because then there's also guilt. You're also dealing with quite a bit of guilt about the choices you made that landed you there and all that stuff. But my best is the flip side of that, right? It's the wisdom from the women who've been there before in lots of ways. So one of the things is I spoke to Kylie Gillies on Mid this week. She lives in New South Wales and her parents live in Queensland, and during the COVID lockdowns, her father died and she couldn't be there. And her sister, so she's one of two girls, and her sister has been the person who's doing all the caring for their parents. And I asked her, I said, what's your best advice for long distance caring? And she said, the sibling who's on the ground, it's their job to do the caring for the parents, right? And do the things they need to do. Your job is to support them, to support the carer.
Yeah.
You're caring for the carer. So it's quite an easy trap to fall into, I think, to call your sister, brother, whatever, and be like, you should be doing this, and why aren't you doing that? And I think they should be doing this, and da-da-da-da-da. She's like, that's not your place because you're not there. You should be the one who they can call and blow off steam to. You're the one who helps how you can, whether that's financially or emotionally supporting the person who's doing all the caring. I thought that was really good advice.
Yeah.
And I've shared that with a few of my friends. And some of my friends are the person who's doing the caring. And I was saying, this is what you need to tell your sibling that you need from them. So I think that was very good advice. But also, I was talking to a good mate of mine yesterday who has lost her dad and is, going through watching her mum, It's such an awful word to say decline, but don't decline, right? I think her mantra is be nice to your mum and eat the truffles. And what she means by that, and I think it's the best advice ever, right? Be nice to your mum is an umbrella term that doesn't just mean literally be nice to your mum, but it means make the call you don't want to make. It's what we were talking about caring the other week. Not last week, but recently, Jessie, when you were talking about feeling guilty sometimes that you haven't called Simon or done whatever. It's like, be nice to your mum just broadly means like do the right thing as much as you can. Like do make those calls. It is sometimes boring and difficult talking to people who are elderly or sick or all those things, but, be nice to your mum. And then the eat the truffles part is about you, and it's about being kind to yourself. The reason that's my friend's mantra is that she loves truffles. And she's like, I shouldn't eat the truffles, but I'm going to eat the truffles. And I'm like, it's like being kind to yourself, whether it's having that glass of wine. I know that's not a healthy crutch, but, or letting yourself go on that weekend away or whatever it is. Like, look after yourself and be nice to your mum is probably the best advice because you don't know what's going to happen.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
That's where I've landed this week. Jessie Stevens, cheer us all up.
I like that a lot. Well, my worst isn't that cheery, but you know how earlier this week we were talking about panic attacks and talking about Carrie and Nate? Weirdly, this week I was recording an episode of podcast, not this one, and I felt myself panicking. And I reckon I've recorded thousands of podcasts over years and years and years, and I went, I could actually feel it. And I felt really anxious. It's funny because when I was reading about this story too, I wondered if there was a contagious element to it because you know how it's sometimes the seed of the prospect of the panic attack that can kind of trigger you. But for some reason, I was just in this context, and the whole thing with podcasting, and maybe this is why I've enjoyed it and lent into it, is that less so than TV, I think, you have to be very in the moment. Like you have to be very focused and you can't spiral because you have to be having a present conversation that is unfolding at a rapid rate. In this moment, I just felt this like, this has to be good. This isn't good enough. You're not doing a good job. This isn't going very well. Be better. Be better. Wow. And then I was pulling myself out of it, which makes it impossible to actually be plugged in and paying attention. And it was so uncomfortable. I managed to kind of get back into it. But it was just funny that in light of
Did you stop and say, I just need a minute?
No.
Because it's not live podcasting. I mean, we record it as live, but if you needed to stop.
Which is, I've said that a few times, and I reckon when I'm podcasting, I'm like, I could really do with 30 seconds just to myself to kind of, because I reckon it's all about breathing, just recalibrate. But I actually did what I was listening to a podcast recently with a psychologist I love who said when that happens and you start to, I think they call it like depersonalization, like where you feel as though you're kind of being pulled out of the moment.
Dissociation,
Yeah. And it can happen with social anxiety. Whoever you're talking to, if you feel like you're losing kind of touch with the situation, you have to just focus on a tiny bit of their face, like focus on their nose or focus on their just something very much in front of you that will kind of reorient you into the moment. And I actually found that did help and kind of stopped all the noisy thoughts. My best has been my mum at the moment is doing Mondays and Wednesdays with Luna and walking in like after my day when Mum and Luna have had and I know they've got their secrets. They think I don't know, but someone's having hot chips and she doesn't eat hot chips. She's having hot chips. It's just such a joy. And then there's another day that Mia, you have Luna, and last week you had Luna and Luca and I work that day, and we found an hour in the afternoon and we looked at each other and we went, let's go get a cocktail. And we went up to the pub while you had Luna and sat with each other.
So nice.
And I had a margarita, and it was just the best afternoon, like to actually just have that moment. You know, it's funny, the gratitude thing, and I've always been very bad at that, but I must to say. I have never been more grateful for like family and seemingly not those, massive shiny things, but just being able to come home and go, my relationship with my grandmothers was one of the greatest joys of my life. And to see that gets perpetuated is just
such joy.
The best thing ever.
And
she gets
Jace
hot
looked
shifts.
after Luna this week as well, which was just hilarious and delightful.
Yeah, look, the people being called on to babysit.
And I love how it's only when you babysit a child that you get a relationship with them because
one-on-one.
Yeah, one-on-one. Because otherwise you're always the B team. If someone else, like if I was only spent time with Luna around you, Jessie, I would never, be the A team because you're the A team. But when there's no one else there, I'm the A team. And then when I'm not there, Jace became the A team and it was so nice.
It's gorgeous.
Speaking of families and people managing careers with babies, we actually had a very interesting conversation as part of a subscriber episode this week. It was all about a particular celebrity's divorce dilemma. So she has separated from her partner and in an interview basically said despite all her status, all her money, all her capital, she fell into the trap that a lot of women do in terms of having all the domestic labour while also making all the money. And we looked at the question as well of whether when you have small children, you can both have big jobs. It was very interesting.
We'll put a link in the show notes. You can listen right now.
That's all we've got time for today and this week. A big thank you to all of you Out Louders for listening to today's show. I hope you're all going to be watching the Logies on Sunday so we can see Mia.
Can you imagine if I had to get up on stage? Like if we win.
Do you have to get up on stage?
Oh my God, I hadn't even thought about that.
Well, I had because I'm like, I just want to wear trainers. Like, can't I just who's going to care? And then I'm like, if we win, I won't say anything. I'll just be standing up the back.
And you'll look terrible because you've not had your hair or makeup done. You're going to look very shiny. You're not going to have proper...
Out Louders, we'll be
lashes.
talking about it next week. You know it, on Monday and probably Tuesday too. Anyway, we're going to be back in your ears. Thank you so much to also our amazing production team, Emeline, Gazilas, and audio production from Leah, Porges, for making us sound good. We love you all. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and want to support us as well, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do so. There is a link in the episode description.